Yo, welcome everyone once again to the We Are Gamer series. My name is your host, Champ Tone, aka Sykosys, a gamer with a passion for Jesus and gaming. It is once again a true pleasure to grace your space this day. Today we have the honor and privilege of interviewing someone I've actually met online during a great stream. He has this stream on Twitch. You can follow it, check it out. It's twitch.tv/CorporateGamer. I think there's a number at what is it? Corporate Gamer,
CorporateGamer 9. Yeah.
Corporate Gamer 9. So check out that channel. And you just heard him, and he is here. So allow me to introduce my guest today, an awesome, amazing person, Corporate Gamer. Welcome, Corporate.
Let's say it's an honor for me to be on here. I haven't done a podcast in a while, and I've
Mm,
been itching to do one, and it's awesome to be doing one with you.
nice, awesome. All right, so let's just jump right into it. So
Yeah, sure.
if you can just please just give us your first name and then the usual slew of online gamer names that you usually use or series of names that you use online.
Yeah. So my name is Philip. I come from Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
Mm.
Half Italian, half French Quebecer. Um, and um, and yeah. So ever since I had I can't. I remember the first site that I had, and my first email, and it
Mm.
sounds like a dirty email, but it's not. It was back then you had excite.com, which was a search engine,
Mm.
and
What?
they had email capabilities. So my first email was corporate1 at
Mm.
excite.com, which sounded
Mm.
dirty.
That's hilarious.
And ever since then, I kind of kept the corporate
Oh,
one,
yeah.
corporate and stuff like that, and with emails and gamer tags and stuff. And the way that
Mm.
came along is I've not in much anymore, but I used to
Mm.
be a big wrestling fan. I'm sure Psych knows about that. Um, I,
Yes.
I I used to be a huge wrestling fan. I used to play all the games that used to come out. I used to
Mm.
be a big fan of WWF WrestleFest,
Mm.
pro wrestling as well
Mm.
in the
Mm.
arcades.
Mm.
And in the '90s, at one point, when The Rock was coming into his own, he became the corporate champion. So he became the
That's
corporate,
right. That's right. The corporate champion. He
and
had the corporate belt and everything. Yeah.
yeah, so he was like the corporate one, and he used to be one of my favorite wrestlers, like him and Stone Cold, right?
Mm.
And at the time, I used to be probably from my friends, I was the biggest wrestling fan.
Mm.
And at one point,
No. No, not
what?
you.
Did you have a question?
No, I was just saying no, not you. You're not a big wrestling fan.
And then at one point, one of my buddies called me
Mm.
corporate because I was the first one from my gang of friends that got a corporate job. Like it wasn't like a supermarket job or whatever. It was like I
Oh,
worked for a utilities company as an intern.
right.
So I was the first one to have so they kept calling me corporate.
Mm.
And after that, it kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And every email I had, it's always a variation of the corporate one.
Mm-hmm.
And then when in 2015 I decided to take my hand in streaming.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in fact, I think it's already been 18 years I've been on Xbox Live,
Wow.
which is insane to think.
Yeah.
My moniker is actually Corporate One, corporate and
Mm.
number one.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody who wants to add me. Um, and then when I started, and I was trying to find nicknames, and I thought, you know what, I should be Corporate Gamer. And
Mm.
then apparently there were 8 other corporate gamers before me. I actually
Oh,
tried them
that's
all, and then
that.
corporate 9 was the first one that wasn't taken,
Yeah,
and
that's
that's I've been
surprising.
corporate gamer ever since. And it kind of came
Mm-hmm.
it came from that. And to be honest, it's actually stuck. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people just call me corp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I'm on their streams or chatting away and stuff like that. So it kind of stuck.
Mm.
And yeah, and I never changed it
And
because it
you
just
are
was good.
the corporate gamer. So you kind of answered actually the second question because the second question we ask is usually what's the actual special meaning does that
Yeah,
name
repeat
actually
it. No.
have for you? So so no, that's actually interesting because I remember. I remember The Rock being the corporate champion. I do remember that, which is funny.
You know
I
what?
never put two and two together like that though. That's interesting.
You know what? I even have the I used to have. So at one point, which this is insane. There's a wrestling gazette that still exists,
Mm.
and I used to get it and I still get it through email. Um, and um, and at one point there was a couple of competitions to win like exact replicas, but I didn't think they were actual replicas. At least the first time. And I actually put my name in the hat, and they picked my name, and I won. So I actually at one point I had both the Ultimate Warrior years of the Intercontinental Championship.
Mm.
So the big one, the big Intercontinental, not the round one. It was the one from the 80s. And
Oh, wow.
and I had the WWF exact replica of right after the Stone Cold skull. No, the
Mm.
one with the globe.
Yeah,
That's the one I have as well.
that's wild.
Belt. And I actually sold one of them. And I shouldn't have.
Oh
The
my goodness,
Intercontinental
it's
one.
probably worth so much now.
Well, so this is the thing. So the one that I have for the Intercontinental, or the one I
Mm.
had for the Intercontinental,
Mm.
still had the WWF logo on it.
Oh, the original logo before they had to change it.
Exactly. The
Wow.
heavyweight belt that I have, it's the WWE logo. It's just the W.
Oh, but the other one you
So
had the W and the F.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't think of it, and I was like, oh, and I sold it like for $50 to one of my buddies,
Holy cow.
and
It's
yeah,
like, hey buddy, can you think you could lend that back? I want to borrow it for a little while.
and I've actually been recently
Mm.
I started following a YouTube channel called Wrestling Bios.
Mm.
It's I think this Irish guy. He started like maybe 2-3 years ago,
That's
and he does
interesting.
like wrestling bios and stuff
Yeah.
like that, like of all like all the old wrestlers and stuff like. And it's been really interesting, and it's
Mm.
been nice to be really like he has a segment like once a week where
Mm.
it's the reliving the war, so the WCW Nitro versus
Oh man, I
WWF
remember.
Raw,
Yeah, I remember
and he
that. I
goes
remember that.
through each episode and he compares them, which one was better, which one was not, for each week.
Wow.
And
Holy cow.
it's like it brings me back so much because I kind of stopped watching on a regular basis probably when
Yeah.
Stone Cold started doing the what
Oh
bit.
really? Mm. Yeah,
Because
I
at one point it
mean,
was like every 3 seconds, everybody like the crowd was just doing what for everything.
yeah, I remember that. I remember that. I
So it
remember
was
that.
like, yeah. So what do you think of the match today?
What? And you're
What?
like,
Like,
what? What? Yeah. What? That's interesting. You were talking, you brought it back to like some old school wrestling. So that'll actually lead into the next question, which for some people, especially guys like me who are a little more seasoned in numbers, if you could just please tell us how old you actually are or the bracket of time that you're in, and when did you actually start video gaming?
so I was born between 1900 and 2000. No, just kidding. I was born in January 1980.
Mm,
And apparently it was a very snowy night.
1980 is a good year.
Um, and I was exposed to video games relatively early.
Mm.
Um, Not necessarily playing them because I know my mom, my mom would actually parent and say go outside periodically.
Yeah.
But I had an uncle that had an Atari 2600, and we had in about I think my brother bought it or he got it for Christmas in 1983. It was the
Mm.
ColecoVision with the Atari adapter,
Wow.
and I had my uncle would come every Wednesday night, and he would play video games with us, and I would just sit in
Mm.
the background just watching them play like hockey, Pitfall,
Mhm. Mhm.
whatever game that was the flavor of the day
Mhm.
or they
Mhm.
wanted to play. He must have had at least like 50 or 60 games. It was
Ooh,
insane.
nice. Nice.
And I started playing. I started watching and stuff like that, and then I started picking it up, playing like
Mm.
hockey
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And then
Mhm.
in between that and my next console, I got a PC,
Oh, nice. Wait,
which
did you have like the big flat, the 5.5 floppy disk drives, or was it up to the 3.5, the harder
Oh,
ones?
no, I had the 5 and 3/4.
Nice.
Um,
That you had to boot with an
so
actual.
my computer was a flavor of I think it was for Radio Shack in Canada. It was the
Mm,
Tandy 2000 SX
the Tandy, yes.
with 64 bytes of RAM
Not
memory.
kilobytes, not megabytes, just
No,
bytes.
bytes. And at one point, like I think a couple of years in, we boosted it to 128.
Wow.
Yeah, that was insane. And the thing is, back then it was super advanced because we didn't have
Yeah.
just one floppy drive. It was this
Mm,
double.
mm-hmm.
So
Right.
you could put the operating system boot in one, and then you
Right.
can have your game or whatever boot in
Right.
the other,
Right. Yep.
which was like high tech back then with the mouse that had like that one button.
The one button mouse. Yeah, it's crazy. I actually do remember that. Wow, that's taking it way back. But they get what did you say? 68? No,
64
64
bytes, and then I boosted
bits.
it to 128,
Holy cow.
which
That's
back then that was almost impossible to do because the computers, the way they built, they weren't made for upgrading.
right. They weren't modular at all. They were
No,
just
so like I forgot who's the one that did it, but we
mm,
had kind of concocted something and the memory got boosted. But
wow,
yeah, it was
that's
like so I played like for years. I played on that
mhm,
computer. That's the computer that I played Police Quest on.
nice. The original
Uh,
Police Quest. Holy cow.
I never, and when I was a kid, I never finished the game
Mm.
because the game is badly designed. It's fun, but if you do
It's-
stuff in the wrong order or you forget something, you're kind of stuck and there's no
you
way of getting back.
right, right.
So like a simple game like nowadays with with the internet and with
Hmm.
the with walkthroughs that you have on YouTube and stuff and
Mm.
walkthroughs, somebody can go through the police quest in like 8 hours, not
I know.
even,
I know.
right? But back in the day, that 8 hours was 6 months.
And there
Unless
was
you had the
no
hint book, there was
right.
no internet at that time.
If you didn't have the book, you had no idea what to do and you had to figure it out, trial
Yeah.
and error. Oh my goodness. All right. Wow, that's wild. All right, so you told us about how, you started gaming and everything. So what was it that really drew you? What was it about video games that drew you to play them? What was the draw for you mainly?
Um, I think my in was sports
Oh,
because I would
really?
play with my brother,
Yeah.
regardless how stupid the game would be. Like, hockey on Atari was not the most advanced thing in the world.
Right.
It was basically a glorified Pong.
Right, right.
Um, but it was the fact that I was playing against my brother, and we would sit
Mm,
down and we're nuts. We actually would have like playoff trees.
mm.
So we
Um,
would pretend. So we would pretend. Okay, so in the NHL, what's the playoff tree? We would
right.
make our own playoff tree, like on a grid paper,
Yeah,
and then we would actually play a best of seven
that's
series
hilarious.
per night
That's
until somebody won the
hilarious.
Stanley Cup, and we had a mini Stanley Cup that we had that we were able to hold up, and we would take a picture.
That's so fun. And you actually took a physical picture of whoever won that night.
Yeah, yeah, it was
That's
those old film those old cranky the old small cameras that you were
yep.
able to crank with the film. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm old, so it was. We didn't have a Polaroid and we didn't have camcorders, nor did we have any cell phones. So
Right.
yeah,
I remember those cameras, and you would just drop it off the whole camera at the wherever it was, the drugstore or whatever, wherever they
yeah.
would
And then
take it.
then it was a big thing getting it developed.
Mm.
Back then you'd go to the drugstore or
Hmm.
wherever they would develop the
Hmm.
pictures, and you would have to hand in the film, and then they get it back, and then notice that half of them had a finger inside in
I
front
know.
of the camera.
You didn't even realize it until it's too late because there was no way to review them. Like you could take everything being digital now. It's such an interesting thing. All right, you were talking about your brother playing with him, and that actually got you into the gaming.
Yeah.
So how was really your family's reaction when you started gaming? Were they against it? Were they for it? Was it more of a they were ambivalent to the whole thing? You did mention your mom though, so how
Yeah,
was
so my mom, similar to parents now, she never
mm,
she it was a different era too. So back then
it was
when I was a kid, you know, I wasn't allowed to sit in front of my computer, like in front of my
Right.
console and play all day, right?
Yeah.
She would like kick me out of the house and go play with your friends outside, which is true. And I used to love doing that. Like I used to play,
Mm-hmm.
on a summer day,
Mm-hmm.
it's where I used to game. I used to play soccer, football, hockey, baseball, whatever
Mm.
sport we could play, and then rinse and repeat every day for the summer.
Right.
But at night, I would play with either my brother or during downtime. During during the week, I wasn't really allowed to play
Mm.
games,
Mm.
but Friday night was my night.
Mm.
Like my mom would allow me to go rent a video game for $1
Nice.
at the secondhand store, which they had like a whole kiosk of a bunch of Nintendo games at the time,
And $1
and
was a lot back then. It wasn't.
yeah. Well, it was kind of my I was back then. I think I used to get
Mm.
$2 a week for doing
Mm.
chores. So it
Allowance.
used to be a dollar to go rent a
Mm.
video game for a day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That changed with the years, right? At one point, you were able to rent like for $10, rent for the week.
Right.
But back then, it was like basically okay, you rented, and then what would usually end up happening is I would keep the game for 2-3 days and then pay
Mm-hmm.
the late fee.
Oh, there.
Um, and then, or sometimes I used to. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people listening had this experience. You either rent a game or you knew a friend that had a specific game.
Mm.
You went to
Mm-hmm.
their house,
Mm-hmm.
or a game you weren't allowed to play because it was technically too gory. Which I laugh at that whole idea
Mortal Kombat.
with the code ABACABB. Yes.
Yes.
Um, and I remember I was for Mortal Kombat. I was the only one of my friend group of friends that had a Genesis. Everybody else had a Super
Oh.
Nintendo.
Oh wow.
So they got the sweat. I got the
The what?
blood.
Right. It was the white. It was white
It was technically
fluid.
sweat. That's what they want.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Just think of how crazy that was. There was, and I remember the uproar of that when that actually happened. It was so crazy. Like there was literally I think like there were even politicians trying to shut it down. Like it was insane. And I'm saying to myself, one, it's just a video game, you know what I mean? And but look at things now, how crazier things have actually gotten. And that they were actually going crazy about a little bit of fake blood being expelled when you got hit. That was
But
like,
it was also at the time
oof.
when
Well,
you
the
had all
fatalities
these
were crazy.
groups that were against like Bugs Bunny is too
Hmm.
violent because you
Yeah.
kick the coyote
I
or the
re-
coyote goes over the cliff.
I
And
know.
I'm
And
like, but I don't know. When I grew up,
I was a kid, so I thought it was weird, but now it's like I guess I can understand why someone
but
would, but yeah, yeah.
but when I was a kid though, like my parents always made sure to tell me this is a cartoon, this is not real life. Like this is
Right,
not,
right.
they would actually tell me like this is not, and I never really considered like Bugs Bunny
Hmm.
like real life. I never thought to myself, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go on the bridge and run off and see what happens.
Yeah,
Like like you don't really do that.
right, right. Me, 100%. I was the exact because it didn't make sense because I knew it was fake. There was it never like I never questioned in my mind, is this real? Is this really happening? So let me go on to this next question though, because you started talking about your heritage. So if you could just, if you please, just give us your heritage and actual cultural background.
Yeah, so I'm half Italian, from Montreal, and half
Mhm.
French Quebecer. And I say
Right.
French Quebecer because if I say I'm French, everybody thinks I'm from France.
Hmm.
Um,
We
but no, it's French from here.
right.
My mom was from here. My dad was from here as well. My
Hmm.
grandparents came from Italy in 1920, which actually it's pretty funny because it's it's funny. So it would be the equivalent. So you live in New York, right?
Hmm.
So it would be the equivalent of my grandmother coming from New York,
Hmm.
my grandfather coming from Jersey,
Mm.
but they met in Montreal.
Hmm. That's
Like they
interesting.
literally lived like right beside each other. Literally one's on top of the mountain, one's at the bottom of the mountain. it's like two towns. It's like 2 towns over.
Yeah,
They never saw each other in their life, but they met in Montreal
that's
and they
crazy.
got married and stuff like that. But they came over in 1927, which is actually pretty funny because we
Oh, that's
have
interesting.
pictures of parts of Montreal not being developed.
Wow. So they migrated from.
Yeah, so there's like right now, like the city obviously is all built up, right?
Yeah.
There's really little, if any, empty
Mm,
space. But back then, if there was there's a picture in front of my grandmother's house where they
mm,
took one picture ahead of them and
yeah.
ahead of the house,
Yeah.
and there's one that's taking a picture down the street, and you see a horse carriage going down on one of the main
Wow.
streets, and you see that after that street, which is a main street, there's
Hmm.
nothing developed. It's fields.
It's just farmland.
It's just farmland, unclaimed
Wow.
land. Um, and
That's so
funny
wild.
story. Well, funny story, kind of funny. Um, my grandmother didn't know she was super smart
Mm,
for somebody that never really went to school because she
mm,
couldn't. So she
mm.
was like in Italy. She was kind of the baker in the whole
Gotcha.
the and so when she came here,
Hmm.
she'd be able to go grocery shopping
Hmm.
and know exactly how much she owed the cashier
Oh, wow.
money
That's
wise.
actually, yeah, that's actually pretty
She was
good.
like, oh, pretty much penny,
Mm,
pretty close from a penny perspective.
mm,
But she didn't know how to read or write. So at
mm.
one point, she owned, and I apologize for my dog barking.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fine.
they, she didn't know how to read or write, but she owned land at one point, and
Wow.
she kind of signed it off,
Really?
not realizing it became one of the big shopping centers in Montreal.
Wow.
And they kind of played on the fact that she couldn't read or write.
That's terrible.
And yeah, it's like right now, like looking back on it, we're like, holy
Mm,
crap, people like they really took advantage. And obviously, she was an
yeah,
immigrant.
yeah.
Uh, she, she spoke barely. She spoke a bit of French
Hmm.
because it's close to Italian, so
Mm,
she was able to understand. But English, she didn't speak at all.
mm.
Um, but she was very good with number, very good cook. She was, it was the sign of the times back then.
Could,
It was the war times too.
could imagine.
Um, so
Mm,
yeah, so that's from there. So that really, from a gaming perspective, my
hmm.
parents, I don't think they understood why I like gaming. It's more also my
Mm.
brother was older. My brother is 9 years older,
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
he always liked playing around with electronic stuff and
Yeah, yeah.
video games. I mean, at my grandmother's house at one point, and I didn't know this at the time.
Mm.
Do you remember the Odyssey?
The Odyssey was the system?
Yeah.
The Odyssey. It rings a bell. It's old, like
So
really old.
this was the to me it was such a waste of money. So it was basically a machine that only played essentially Pong. But the
Mm.
way they used to make it so that you would be able to play different games is that you used to put a plastic on the CRT TV. So you would have like a
What?
tennis court, and then you would have another one would
Oh,
be a hockey rink.
yes. Yes, I've seen that. So it just changes, but it's literally you're doing the exact same thing.
It's literally Pong. They just
Yeah,
found
yeah.
it was so like it was so bad, and at one point I don't know how they got that, but I played it once and I was like, oh my god, this is boring.
Yeah,
Holy crap!
that's that's really crazy. All right, so
And the
you
thing
did.
is,
Yeah, go ahead. Finish.
I was
Go
gonna
go
say
ahead.
the crazy thing is even if you had let's say a hockey rink and you had a goal, if it missed
Wow.
the net, it would
Mm.
still count as a point
I know,
because
because
it
it
was
was the
Pong.
whole behind it, right?
Exactly.
That is so crazy. All right, you started talking about the cultural impact actually on your gaming, and yeah, you talked about how, because in that space, where your parents and where their parents especially came from, gaming wasn't a thing at all. So you started gaming and you started going into the positives and negatives impact that your actual culture had on your gaming experience. Has there been any other positive or negative impact that your culture specifically has had?
No, I think it was more. I mean, my parents controlled my gaming, which I
Mm,
appreciate now.
mm,
With the years, I became, I guess I became less addicted.
mhm,
and it's like only later, much later, I became more of a gamer. Like I would sit down like for days on like a full day, and I would just game.
Yeah.
That came like much later.
Mm.
So I had like some gaming, but the thing is, I think my parents kind of didn't understand it,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, they kind of, they played different types of games.
Right.
Either they would play, Monopoly, they would play, Trivial Pursuit, or they would play another type of game, or even poker.
Yeah.
They would have
Yeah.
poker nights, or they would have card night.
Yeah.
Well, replace that with playing a video game once or an hour or two
Yeah.
a week. For them, it was like, it's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing, just a different era, right?
That's interesting because it
Yes, they
is.
never really. Well, the only time they would say no is during a school night. But other
Yeah.
than that, if my chores were done, and everything was
Mm-hmm.
fine, I
Mm-hmm.
was able to game.
And that makes sense. I mean, I'm a parent, so I kind of understand that now. I definitely didn't at the time, but
Yes.
now it's like, hey, yeah, school is actually kind of important. We need you to we need you to
Well,
kind
the
of
thing is,
focus on.
you don't think about it back then, but
No, definitely
no, you
not.
get a tantrum because your mom
Right.
says or your dad says, "Hey, get off the game
Right.
console or whatever."
Right.
And you'd be like, "No, me, 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 me."
Yeah.
But looking back on it now, I'm kind of happy they did that
Mm.
because that meant that I was kind of addicted, and I don't want to finish. And although to be fair, though, there was no safe states.
Yes,
So
you had
like
to beat it.
games, yeah. So if you were like really into a game and it was
Oh,
like
I
far
know.
in, convincing your parents do not turn off the console,
Not a thing.
yeah, that didn't work.
Not a thing. Not a thing. I know how that is. All right. So why you still play games now? Because you do stream. I remember you were doing Human Revolution. Great game. I just that is just such a good game to just watch. So why do you still choose to play video games even now?
Probably so. The reason has changed with the years. So the
Mm.
way when I used to be in high school, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or I
Mm-hmm.
used to be in college or even university,
Yeah.
it was my break away from studying. I
Mm.
would take like an hour, play NHL 94, play a game or two, and then go back
Mm-hmm.
to studying. It would just be a way to distract myself
Yeah.
instead of watching TV or doing something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the years, it's kind of become, and I'm sure you've noticed on my stream. You mentioned I played. It was actually Mankind Divided that I played
Oh, I'm
recently,
sorry.
but I played them all. Actually, thanks to you, I played the original Deus Ex because that was a suggestion from you.
Yes.
Um,
Such a crazy game.
yeah, those are all fantastic games. Um, what was I gonna say?
You were
Wow.
talking about why you still play the video games now.
Oh yeah. So with the years, I'll be honest with you. Either streaming or TV.
Mm.
Yeah, I'll watch a game here or there.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'll watch like sports. Like I do still watch sports, but like TV
Mm-hmm.
shows,
Mm-hmm.
I'll watch one here or there. But I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have cable at my house. I have over the air,
Mm-hmm.
so I just watch like basically the news and stuff like that. And if I need to stream anything, I stream it on Netflix or Amazon or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
But I don't. I find, and maybe it's me getting older, and I sound like my parents, I guess. But times are different. The writing
Mm.
is different and I find a lot of the TV shows, a lot of the movies, they don't grab me as much as they used to,
Mm.
but games do.
Mm-hmm.
Narrative games do.
Yeah.
So you know that I play usually narrative games, like games with story in them.
Yeah.
Witcher 3, Deus Ex series,
Yeah. Yeah.
which Fallout.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
it's games that have like a narrative. They have a story. You're
And
immersed
they're
in yourself
and they're
in it.
so good. Those narratives are right. It for me. I agree with you on that point. That's something, especially like the ones you just said, Witcher 3, Fallout, the Fallout series. Fallout 3, New Vegas, Fallout 4, the Deus Ex, the new games that have come out. Those stories are just so captivating, and you're playing it because you want to see where the story goes. It's okay. The gameplay is
Even
good,
but
but
even but even more than that, it's like you're in control of the story,
yes,
right? So it's more immersive,
yes,
and even that's the difference with a movie. So
mm,
a movie will play like whatever. The movie is the movie. Like The Godfather is The Godfather, and it finishes the way it finishes. Great movie, fantastic movie.
Yeah.
But there's no different. There's no like 4 different endings, unless they have a director's cut that has a different alternative ending, like the Justice League
Right.
or something along those lines. But the majority of movies, it's very linear in the sense
Right.
that you watch the movie, it's over, you rewatch it, you're rewatching the
Mm-hmm.
same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Games, for the most part, have replayability.
Yes.
So, like Deus Ex, the original,
Mm-hmm.
you can play it 8 different times with 8 different outcomes.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, the endings there's like only 4 different endings, but the way you get to that point could be
Right.
changing. There's different arches. You can make different decisions. Your
Yep.
build is different,
Yep. Yep.
right? So to me, if you ask me, would I rather watch 3 hours of either a movie or a TV
Mm-hmm.
show,
Mm.
or stream a video game like that for
Mm.
2 or 3 hours or four
Mm-hmm.
hours?
Mm-hmm.
I'll take the video game
Yeah.
because I'm more involved in the video game
Yep.
than I would be watching the movie for the 18th time.
Yep. I
And
I I
there's
hear
always
you
the
on that.
possibility of, and Mankind Divided was an example.
Yeah.
I've played it 3 different times before.
Mm.
I streamed it once,
Mm-hmm.
and then this time I decided, you know what? Let me see how it is when you play Game Plus,
Mm.
because I never played it with a Game Plus,
Mm.
and the experience was completely different than
Mm-hmm.
when I played it the first 3 times.
Because you have everything
Right?
unlocked
So
and
it's yeah, that's kind of the reason why I keep playing it, and I always told my brother always told me, and we're always in agreement. We'll be 80 years old, 85 years old, in diapers and no teeth, and we'll still be playing video games or playing head-to-head NHL games.
nice winning
Um,
winning that Stanley Cup, taking the picture.
yeah,
That is so wild. Here, let let me just move it on because we could just keep talking. This topic in particular, I'm really passionate about as well because I feel the exact same way. It's such a you're involved in the story and right, it's not the same. It's not exactly the same every time. All right, so let's go to this next question. So yeah, we actually wow. Let's what is what is your actual favorite video game of all time?
that's a hard one
Yeah,
because
you've been
there's
playing
different
for a while.
generations, there's different
Yeah,
types.
yeah.
However, Um, if I would have to go, and if I go say like it's a game that I go back to, or games that
Mm.
I go back, and I'll cheat and I'll say two. One of them is Blades of Steel on the NES. I'm sure you've seen me play it
I
numerous times on stream.
I have
It's
and I've played it myself. Yes.
and it's one of those games where it's stupid. There's no stats. It's super simple. But man, that sound, the hit, the pass,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there's something about that. Maybe it's nostalgia. I don't know what it is, but I always have a blast playing it. And I know
Hit
that I can play it for like an hour and a half, and I'm done.
it hits all the right buttons for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's this?
If
What's
I
the
would look
second?
at a whole,
Mm,
as a whole, I can choose like different games specifically, or even
mm,
franchises.
mm,
I it's it. I always seem to go back to either Deus Ex or Fallout.
mm,
I always tell myself I'm not gonna play this again,
mm-hmm.
and I always go back. I started playing. I started like so for Deus Ex. I played Human Revolution first,
Mm-hmm.
Mankind Divided.
Mm-hmm.
Then you suggested the original Deus Ex,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Invisible War.
Invisible War.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that if I look at the package of games,
yeah.
I would have to say Deus Ex.
Mm,
Only
mm,
because there's like the lore of it is awesome.
yes.
The feel of it is super awesome. The soundtrack is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, it's one. Like somebody has those movies where you can watch it 1,000 times, you'd never
Mm-hmm.
care.
Mm-hmm.
Either it's passing on TV or whatever, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've watched this 1,000 times. I know what happens, but I'm gonna watch it.
Yes.
It's the same thing. And the only reason Deus Ex kind of narrows out Fallout
Mm,
is because um, I just don't like the direction that Fallout went in. So right now
mm,
they kind of went with Fallout 76, which I think was
mm.
supposed to be Elder Scrolls Online version for Fallout, which never
Yeah.
really I've had trouble getting into it.
Yeah.
Maybe Fallout 5 will be different. But
I can hope.
well, I think there are players that do play Fallout 76. There
Mm,
are quite a few. But to me, Fallout 76, they took out everything I kind of like about the game.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, on release, they made some improvements. I'll grant them that, but the world was empty at the beginning. There
Mm-hmm.
was no NPCs. Everything was
Mm-hmm.
through terminals.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of the world was cold, which I guess would make sense in a
Mm-hmm.
post-apocalyptic world.
Mm-hmm.
But it just lost its luster.
Yeah.
And to this day, I've said this numerous times. My favorite game in the series is probably Fallout 3
Mm.
because it's a
Mm.
perfect mix of
Mm-hmm.
ambiance,
Mm-hmm.
feel,
Mm-hmm.
gameplay,
You get that.
length of game.
Yeah.
Like it, you don't feel like it's a grind because
Right.
you can play the main story.
And it is long, but it's not like you're not dredging through it. It's
It's
enjoyable.
so if I compare that to, let's say, Assassin's Creed.
Mm-hmm.
Assassin's Creed, no matter what game you're playing, at
Mm-hmm.
least the releases, the new releases
Mm-hmm.
that came out, the last three,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to do the main story and then you have to stop to level up.
Right.
You have to do the side quests and then okay, then you level up enough. Okay, then you do the main quest again and you have to
Right.
let.
Right.
Whereas Fallout 3, you don't need, and I guess New Vegas to a point.
The way it
But-
flows is I agree with you 100. It flows so well. Yeah.
And it's just the music, the radio. Yeah, you get taken down if you put it during streams, but if I play it,
I know.
I started playing it again. It's just the radio station, the feel, the
Mm-hmm.
look, the green hue
Mm-hmm.
of Fallout 3.
Yes.
Like everything I don't know, it just feels like,
Yeah.
I could get immersed for this for hours playing
No,
it.
I hear you. Well, you're talking about you've actually spoken about a lot of good moments in your own personal gaming, and we're starting to wind down. This has been some great freaking discussions, man. I mean, oh, I can keep talking just on the first point. I think that we were talking probably for like another hour, but you started talking about gaming memories. What's that one gaming memory though that you will absolutely never ever forget?
Um, it will be. I'll have to come back to this. It's basically playing NHL with my brother,
Mm.
like being on couch co-op and bad mouthing each other. It's yelling, swearing left, right, and center because we
Mm.
missed a shot or he scored on me and I scored on him or whatever. No, often my mom would say we're too loud because we would be screaming. But it's those memories, and I'm
Mm.
picking that one in particular. But I think it would be like in general, like
Mm.
playing games with others, right? Like
Yeah.
people. I laugh at people that say, okay, or where I used to work before my previous
Hmm.
job.
Hmm.
I used to tell them I used to stream, and they're like, yeah, I don't understand why anybody would watch you stream. And I'm like,
Wow,
okay,
that's hard.
when did what? No, but not necessarily to me, but like in
Mm.
general, why would anybody go onto a website and watch somebody stream, right?
Oh,
I'm like,
yes, I've actually heard the same.
and
Yes.
and my reply to that is, well, did you grow up in the 80s? Like,
Mm.
if I knew they were that age, did you grow up in the 80s? Yeah. Did you go to arcades? Yeah. Did you ever stand beside somebody playing Operation
Exactly.
Wolf?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you wanted
That
to see
is
how far they go? Yeah.
that is a
It's the exact
perfect
same
the
thing,
exact same thing. That's right. That's
with the
right.
exception that I'm on a couch instead of being in an arcade.
Right. And that
And
it's such a good time. You're with that person. Either you're playing or they're playing and you're cheering them on. You want
yeah,
them to win. It's such a that's
and
that's such a good yeah, I like
and
that.
and
I
one of
like
the
that.
main reasons why I started streaming,
Mm,
you know, it- yeah, initially maybe I had like ambitions to make it bigger or
mm,
whatever, at
mm,
least make it sustainable for me.
mm,
Then I learned quickly that I'm not that type of host
mm,
that's like super entertaining all the time and they can always have something to say and I can talk for 4 hours. Like if I get engaged,
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk. But other than that, like I don't. I sometimes I don't speak for periods of time because I'm either really into the game or whatever.
Yeah.
However, it's people I've watched others. My gateway to your
Mm-hmm.
channel was through Avante,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I watched him, and it was completely random. It was one night I was looking at League of Legends, which I don't even play, and I was just looking for a random thing, and I looked at his channel, and it looked really fun. I think you
Mm.
were on Death by Cows, where was on, and stuff like that, and it was really fun. And I'm like, you know what? I'll follow because I really like
Mm-hmm.
the host, and I
Mm-hmm.
ended up
Mm-hmm.
like because at one point you guys used to play all together, and
Yeah.
so I went, and I that was, but it became a community and became friends with you guys,
Yeah.
and you guys came to my stream, I
Yep.
went to your stream,
Yep.
not because it was a follow for follow, but it was a natural thing.
It was a
I subbed
connection.
to
Yeah.
your channel, and no, most people that I follow, I
Mm-hmm.
actually watch them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, very often now, I feel like, especially the market is like the streaming environment is so saturated now,
Yeah.
and then now with
Definitely.
hosting getting disappearing from Twitch, it's going to be even
Mm-hmm.
harder to discover
Mm-hmm.
new, like,
Mm-hmm.
smaller streams and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it's a community where I became friends. Now I there's a handful of people that I became really good friends with, and I chat with them all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
some of them have stopped streaming, and I still chat with them. And that's kind of what I was going for. At the end, it was more for
Mm-hmm.
the friendships, the camaraderie,
Mm-hmm.
the community of supporting each other,
Yeah.
and seeing, because there's two types of people that I follow.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them I follow because I'm not going to play the games they ever play.
Mm.
So I like to see other people play those games to
Right.
understand how the
Right.
game works, but I never would sit down and play League of Legends. No offense, but for me, it's I'm not a League of Legends guy. I'm not going to sit down and play League of Legends.
Totally
Same thing
understandable.
with I watch Kenny because
Mm.
he's been doing better Quake than never streams.
Mm.
So like on weekends, he's been streaming. I think it's over a year now. It's a year and a half. He's
Nice.
been playing pretty much community maps. Like, so he played the
Mm.
original game and then he played like Quake
Oh,
packs.
that other people make.
Yeah, but it's been like a
Nice.
year and a half every
Oh,
weekend,
wow.
Saturday and Sunday.
Wow,
But
wow,
it's not
wow.
something I would necessarily do,
Right, right,
right? Like it's not like
right,
it's fun. It's great. He's a great host,
right,
but he also like he likes that stuff. So like I watch him play those
right.
games, and then there's
Yeah,
other games
yeah.
where other people that I watch them play similar games to me to see how they would go. But
Mm-hmm.
often, and I said this numerous times, in terms of streaming, the game is the gateway to the streamer.
Yes.
So you get in by what they're playing. You're
Right,
interested by what they're playing,
right.
but you stay for the host.
Yeah, yeah.
Like at some
Absolutely.
point, the games don't care. You could play like solitaire. I really don't care if you're streaming and I like you. I'm gonna watch you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No,
It
and that's yeah, that's a good point, that community aspect and things like that. And yeah, I mean, even with the streaming, but that I love the example that you used about the Operation Wolf, because I know I have done that personally, where you're literally standing next to the cabinet, seeing how far they can get, because you can't get as they're like at a spot that you've never been to, and you're like, oh snap, this is kind of crazy. You know what I mean? So I love that point. But here, let me.
or even probably the one to me that sticks out. There used to
Mhm.
be a convenience store in the back. They had a Mortal Kombat,
Oh man.
and I had one of my buddies that I don't know how the hell, because at the time it wasn't on consoles, it was only in the
Right,
arcade,
right.
and he knew every move on every guy. I don't know how much money he ever
Oh,
spent,
that's crazy.
and I could maybe get to the mirrored match
Right,
at
right.
one point, like that's when I the peak, but I could never finish the game. I could it's impossible unless I put like my life savings in there.
It's funny.
Um,
It's funny you
but
say
he
that.
was able to get the
Yeah.
final boss. He knew the trick to get to the lizard,
Wow.
and
Oh,
I didn't even know
reptile.
that existed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have a friend. We actually there was someone we actually interviewed, I want to say I don't remember the episode, but they actually like their number one gaming memory is them beating Mortal Kombat in the arcade. And yeah, they it was like one of those people, and there were people gathered around him in the pizzeria. It was a pizzeria, it was a New York pizzeria. And there was like all these people around them. Oh my goodness. Okay, wait. So we have one last question. I know these conversations are amazing. They are so good. All right, let's just finish this last question, and then oh, this was such a good discussion. So you talked about different advancements in technology. You spoke about a lot of them. You know, the whole community aspect and stuff like that. And so, how do you feel the evolution of technology has actually impacted your own gaming experience in a positive or a negative way?
Well, it's definitely in a positive way. I
Mm.
mean, it's unthinkable of like when I was a kid, you were choosing games based on the cover art because the game you knew was would look like shit. Sorry, I swore, but it would look like crap, and then you would be like, get
Mature
home and be
audiences.
disappointed because it was like a bunch of pixels
Yeah,
on the screen.
yeah.
Um,
And those
and
box
then
arts for the Atari, especially, were actually pretty amazing. And yeah, and then you play the game, and you're like, oh,
like there's some games that I'm like, how did this even get out? Like forget about the ET game, whatever. But there's other game like there's games that like I think I forget I think it was Avante that tweeted this.
mm,
Somebody was like something about Pitfall and stuff like that, and I'm like, you know what? Thinking back on it, my first open world game
mm,
was
mm,
Pitfall 2 because you can go in any
mm,
direction you want.
on the
You don't have
Atari,
to follow a certain way of doing things. You can go left, you can go right.
right,
There's a certain path to get to the end of the game, yes.
right,
But
right.
you don't have to follow the same path all the time. You can do different things. You
Mm,
can go through the water, you can go on top, you can go,
yeah, yeah,
So technically that was the first open world.
right, right.
Um, but with technology, I mean, if you look at the games now,
Mm,
and back then, like even when you look like 10, 15 years, like the new games that come out, you're like, oh, it looks so
mm,
realistic. And then you look back on it, and you're like,
mm.
yeah, that kind of looked like oh poop.
Not so
But
realistic
now,
in reality.
but today, if you look at, the Call of Duties of this world, or even the
Mm,
new games that are coming in Unreal Engine 5,
hmm,
you
hmm.
know, they look pretty, like they look wow.
Yeah.
Especially if you
Even
have ray tracing on and you have like
yeah,
the effects going,
the racing games look like
it's
real
fantastic.
racing. Yeah.
So I think it's improved. Like
Mm,
it's definitely a positive.
hmm, hmm,
Now, to the point of when we were kids and people were saying, oh, the violence in video games and Mortal Kombat, and you were
mm.
like, yeah, okay, but it's a red blotch on a pixelated blotch. It's not really violence. There might be an argument today to say something like Call of Duty is becoming
Mm,
pretty realistic.
mm, mm,
There's an argument to say, yeah, maybe things are because even some of the
mm,
horror
mm,
games,
mm.
they're pretty gruesome,
Yeah,
right?
they scare the hell out of you.
You okay?
No, some of them I've watched, and I'm just like, oh, I can't watch this. This is crazy. This is
You
really
know,
scary. I can't watch
Well,
this.
exactly. So, like, I think in general it's a positive.
Mm,
I think that in general, though, I feel that the gaming industry, and I've said this numerous times, and I think
mm,
I back when I used to do written reviews, I did this
mm,
comparison.
mm,
I compared the video game industry to the movie industry, but the difference is what the movie industry did in 100 years, the
mm,
gaming industry did in 20.
definitely. Yeah.
Because if you look at how games have progressed,
Yep.
they're at the same point as movies.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
remastering, they're re-releasing, they're
That's
doing a
funny.
bunch of, and then you're saying, okay, but what new IP is out there? And
Yeah.
if you want something that's new,
Right.
what do you have to do? You have to go on the independent circuit,
Right. Right.
right? So you kind
Right.
of have something different, like the cat game there. What's it called? Um,
Which
the
one?
one that everybody's going nuts over. That's an indie game. Um,
Mm.
why can't I remember the name?
If,
Stray?
yeah, I can't. Oh,
Yeah,
the
I think
the
it's
cat
Stray.
the cat game Stray. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It took me a while to
so I
put two and
mean,
two together, but yeah, that game, and that's a simple game.
but apparently ever like I haven't played it because I think it's also on PlayStation 5, I think. But
Mm,
it looks fantastic,
it does.
and apparently it's super fun. It's very short. Another thing too, like some of these games are getting so long.
Mm.
Like I don't have 100 hours to invest in the game.
Well,
Like I
sometimes, yeah. I mean, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. It is. It is, and especially us as adults, we don't have the hours to just sit as we used to, which is like, yeah, yeah, which is its own thing. Oh, corporate gamer. Yeah, we can definitely go on, and we probably will once this podcast is over. So, I mean, I just,
or come back for part two.
yeah, right. I know. I'm looking at what we're gonna do with the next round of stuff, and well, I just want to say, corporate gamer 9. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and just this was such a great discussion, getting to know you, and just the person behind that gamer tag. And it's funny because we've actually never met, and we can talk to each other like we've known each other for so long. It's so cool. Corporate, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for being a part of this episode. I just want to everyone listening, I just want to say thank you for letting us share your space to stay. Remember that you are awesome. Jesus loves you, and ganadora.